Picture this: two titans of the Gunpowder Age, separated by half the globe and just a few decades. In the east, Oda Nobunaga, the demon king who unified a fractured Japan with ruthless ambition and a revolutionary army of arquebusiers. In the west, Gustavus Adolphus, the Lion of the North, whose military reforms forged Sweden into a European superpower, turning the tide of the 30 Years' War. But what if these two legends, these gods of gunpowder, were to clash on the battlefield? Today, we're re-diving into one of history's greatest what-ifs: 30,000 of Nobunaga's elite samurai and Ashigaru Arquebusiers versus the disciplined might of Gustavus Adolphus' Swedish army. Who would win this ultimate showdown of early modern warfare? Let's set the stage. It's the late 16th century in Japan. The country is a war zone, a chaotic mosaic of feuding warlords. Then comes Oda Nobunaga. He wasn't just another daimyo fighting for a piece of the pie. He was a visionary. He saw the future, and it smelled like gunpowder. While many samurai traditionalists scoffed at firearms, Nobunaga embraced the Tanegashima, the Japanese matchlock arquebus, with a passion. He didn't just equip his soldiers with them, he revolutionized how they were used. His masterpiece was the Battle of Nagashino in 1575. Facing the legendary Takeda clan's cavalry, considered the most fearsome in all of Japan, Nobunaga did the unthinkable. He fielded a massive force of arquebusiers, possibly as many as 10,000, but only 3,000 were actively firing. He arranged them in ranks behind wooden palisades. As the Takeda cavalry charged, expecting to smash through the peasant foot soldiers, they were met with a storm of lead. Nobunaga had his men fire in coordinated volleys. While one rank fired, the others reloaded. This continuous rolling thunder of gunfire broke the Takeda charge, again and again, shattering their power forever. It was a tactical masterstroke that announced the end of the traditional samurai cavalry's dominance and the dawn of a new era of warfare in Japan. So, Nobunaga's army is no joke. It's a huge force, battle-hardened, and led by a brilliant, ruthless commander who understands the power of massed firepower. Now, let's journey to Northern Europe, a few decades later, in the early 17th century. The continent is engulfed in the 30 Years' War, one of the most destructive conflicts in human history. And striding into this chaos is King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden. Like Nobunaga, Gustavus was a military innovator. He looked at the standard European armies of his time's low, cumbersome formations of pikemen and clumsy musketeers and saw room for massive improvement. The Swedish army he created was a well-oiled machine. He lightened the muskets, making them easier to handle and getting rid of the fork rest. This meant his soldiers could move faster and fire more quickly. But his real genius, much like Nobunaga's, was in the tactics that drilled his infantry relentlessly. He developed the Salvo, where entire battalions would unleash a devastating simultaneous volley at close range, followed immediately by a decisive charge with pikes and swords. It was shock and awe, 17th century style. But he didn't stop there. Gustavus was a master of combined arms. He integrated his cavalry and, most importantly, his artillery, directly into his infantry formations. He developed light, mobile field cannons that could be moved around the battlefield by just a couple of men or a single horse. This meant his infantry brigades had their own dedicated artillery support, able to blast holes in enemy formations right before the musketeers unleashed their salvo. At the Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631, this new Swedish system crushed the veteran imperial army, shocking Europe and establishing Gustavus as the foremost military mind of his age. So now we have our two armies. Let's imagine a neutral battlefield, somewhere with open plains and rolling hills, giving both sides a fair chance. On one side, 30,000 warriors under Oda Nobunaga. This force would be a mix of Ashigaru peasant foot soldiers and samurai. A significant portion, let's say 10,000 to 15,000, are arquebusiers. The rest are armed with yari or spears and swords, including the legendary katana. They are disciplined, loyal to the death, and fresh from the brutal unifying wars of Japan. On the other side, Gustavus Adolphus with a professional army of maybe 15,000 to 20,000 Swedes and German mercenaries. This might seem like a numerical disadvantage, but don't count them out. His force is composed of highly drilled musketeers and pikemen in a roughly 1-to-1 ratio, supported by elite cavalry and, crucially, those game-changing light field guns. The battle begins. Nobunaga, favoring a strong defensive position, just like at Nagashino, would likely have his men set up wooden palisades or other field fortifications. He'd place his thousands of arquebusiers in his famous rotating volley lines, ready to unleash a continuous stream of fire on any approaching enemy. His spearmen and samurai would be held in reserve, ready to counterattack or exploit any weakness. Nobunaga's plan is simple. Let the enemy break themselves against his wall of lead. Gustavus, however, is not the Takeda clan. He wouldn't order a reckless head-on charge. He's a tactician who values flexibility and firepower. As his army advances, the first thing Nobunaga's forces would notice is the artillery. Those light Swedish cannons would begin to bombard the Japanese positions from a distance. The Japanese had cannons, but they were generally heavier, less mobile, and not as well integrated into their tactics. The Swedish artillery would start to create gaps in Nobunaga's carefully arranged lines and disrupt his command structure. This is an advantage the Japanese simply have no answer for. As the Swedish infantry gets closer, they would advance in their smaller, more flexible tactical units. Nobunaga's Arquebusiers would open fire, unleashing their rolling volleys. The Tanegashima is a capable weapon, but the Swedish musket is arguably superior. It's lighter, fires a heavier ball, and the Swedish troops are drilled for a faster rate of fire. Here's where the tactical doctrines really clash. Nobunaga's system is designed to deliver a continuous attritional fire. It's a meat grinder. Gustavus's system is designed for a single, decisive blow. The Swedish battalions would absorb the Japanese fire as they advance. Then, at optimal range, maybe 30 or 40 paces, they would halt. On command, the entire front rank of a Swedish brigade, hundreds of muskets, would fire in a single, deafening crash. This salvo would be absolutely devastating to the tightly packed Japanese ranks behind their palisades. Immediately following this thunderous volley, the Swedish pikemen would surge forward, alongside swordsmen, to engage in hand-to-hand combat. This is the 1-2 punch that defined Swedish tactics. Fire, then steel. How would Nobunaga's army handle this? The samurai are, without question, some of the most formidable melee warriors in history. A one-on-one duel between a samurai and a Swedish soldier. The samurai likely has the edge in swordsmanship, but this isn't a series of duels. It's a battle of formations. The Swedish pikemen are trained to fight as a unit, presenting a dense hedge of steel points that's incredibly difficult to break. Nobunaga would undoubtedly commit his samurai reserves to counter the Swedish charge. The clash would be horrific. Katanas versus pikes and broadswords. The courage and skill of the samurai would be immense, but they would be fighting against a disciplined combined arms system. While the infantry lines are locked in a brutal struggle, Gustavus would use his cavalry. Swedish cavalry were trained to charge home with the sword, not to prance around firing pistols. They would swing around the flanks of the chaotic melee, crashing into the rear of Nobunaga's army, creating panic and confusion. It's a tough call, but the Swedish advantages start to stack up. First, the integrated mobile artillery gives Gustavus a tool to disrupt and soften up the enemy that Nobunaga lacks. Second, while both commanders are masters of volley fire, the Swedish salvo tactic is designed for shock and breakthrough, which might be more decisive than Nobunaga's more attritional approach. Third, and perhaps most importantly, is the combined arms doctrine. Gustavus's army is a finely tuned instrument where infantry, cavalry, and artillery all work together seamlessly. Nobunaga's army, while effective, was more infantry-centric. In the end, while Nobunaga's numbers and the sheer ferocity of his warriors would inflict terrible casualties on the Swedes, the tactical flexibility, superior artillery, and disciplined combined arms system of Gustavus Adolphus would likely carry the day. After a long and bloody struggle, the Swedish system would likely break the Japanese formation. This isn't a knock on Nobunaga at all. He was a genius who worked with the tools and context he had, and he did it better than anyone else in Japan. But Gustavus Adolphus had the benefit of a few more decades of military evolution in the brutal crucible of the 30 Years' War. He perfected a system of warfare that would dominate European battlefields for a century. It's a fascinating matchup of two of history's greatest military minds. Both understood that gunpowder was changing the world, and both built armies that were far ahead of their time. But in this hypothetical clash of titans, the Lion of the North's combined arms symphony would likely overwhelm the Demon King's wall of fire. What do you guys think? Who would you bet on in this ultimate gunpowder showdown? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this historical what if, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. See you next time.